Wondering which wide receivers you need to invest in, who may be sleepers, and who we don't even want to worry about? Today's video is going to be discussing over 100 wide receivers, almost every single wide receiver on an NFL roster, to figure out who has the most upside, who has the best floor, and who we don't give a about. What's going on, Headliner Nation? Today's video might be the most in-depth, quickest video that you've seen on wide receivers this entire offseason, and that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but I'm going to be diving into over 100 wide receivers today and giving you some quick information about everybody to try and determine who we want to invest in the most. Are there some sleepers that we want to keep an eye on? Maybe some guys that don't need to be talked about right now, but maybe they'll pop up later on in the season. And I did a running back video very similar to this just last week. I had a little bit of fun with it, and I assigned categories based on different types of penalties that might be called during an NFL game. And while tons of people thought it was great information, there was a few people who felt like it was a little too confusing. So today for wide receivers, it's back to basics. I'm going to go ahead and list each wide receiver, and then I'm going to give you their ceiling and their floor for the 2025 season. Is their ceiling a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3? Maybe they're more of a flex play, someone that you might stash on the bench, or someone who's going to probably be on waivers for a majority of the year, if not the entire season. And with the NFL season just under a week away, you need to make sure that you renew your membership here on the Fantasy Headliners for the 2025 season. But maybe you're new and you're wondering if you should become a member today. Well, the benefits are insane, and if you want to get better at fantasy football and have a better shot at your championships in 2025, becoming a member here could end up being a big part of that. And we have 3 different tiers depending on how in-depth you want to get with your fantasy football experience. It could be anything from access to our exclusive Discord, where you can chat with other members of Headliner Nation and even get exclusive access to Jake and I by asking us as many questions as you would like through our ticketing system. Or maybe you just want some more content here on YouTube. You can get exclusive content throughout the week that is not available to anybody in the general public, like our weekly flex, kicker, and defensive special team rankings. The tiers range anywhere from $5 a month up to $20 a month. And if you hit that join button down below the video, you can see what perks come from each individual tier, and then you can decide which one is going to be best on your path to a fantasy football championship in 2025. Let's go ahead and kick things off in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills. And I do believe Khalil Shakir is the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo. And depending on the type of league that you are in, he could probably range anywhere from a ceiling wide receiver 2 to a floor flex play for you. In leagues that you have PPR scoring, he's going to get even safer. Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer are going to be the deep play threats this season. And I do believe that Josh Palmer has an opportunity to be better than Keon Coleman based on his upside. Keon Coleman, I think, could be a little bit more inconsistent. While you would probably own Keon Coleman by leaving him on your bench a little bit more often, Josh Palmer, his floor probably would be reserved for being left on the waivers. But if you pick up Palmer because he's playing well, he could give you some wide receiver 2 upside. For the Miami Dolphins, as long as Tua is healthy and as long as Hill is healthy, he's got wide receiver 1 upside. And even if anything were to happen to Tua this season, he's still going to be a wide receiver 3 play in any given week. You might put him in the flex as well. It could get a little bit lower than that, but it's going to be really hard to sit Tyreek Hill even without Tua, because if he does have a good game, you're going to be kicking yourself in the butt. Jalen Waddle is not nearly the high upside play that we once thought when he came into the league. He's more of a wide receiver 2 play for me, but based on where he's being drafted, regardless of what happens, you're going to be leaving him on the bench even if Tua isn't playing. Malik Washington, his name keeps coming up here in the preseason and throughout training camp. They believe that he could be a really good shot in the flex. If something were to happen to Jalen Waddle, Malik Washington could become a wide receiver 3 opportunity. And then Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, bench or waivers. He might score a couple of touchdowns here or there. He might be a big-bodied slot option in the red zone, but really nothing more than that. The New England Patriots have a ton of options at the wide receiver position, and you got to believe that a healthy Stefon Diggs coming back from injury could at least give you some wide receiver 2 numbers. Flexing him as well could end up being an option, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that you'll be sitting with Drake May this season. Demario Douglas feels like the safest option on this team. He could definitely be a wide receiver 2, especially in PPR leagues, but in worst case scenario, just like Stefon Diggs, you can probably flex him as well. Kyle Williams, Matt Collins, Kayshon Boutte, Efton Chisholm, all of these guys. I mean, Kyle Williams could end up being a flex based on his big playability alone. If not, he's going to be left on waivers. The other 3 guys, definitely guys that maybe at some point in time, if there's an injury, you pick them up, you put them on the bench, but more than likely will be left on waivers for a majority of the season as well. The New York Jets will be really interesting this year. If Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson have that connection that they did in college, he could be a wide receiver 1 again. But even based on the numbers Garrett Wilson put up last year with Aaron Rodgers and that mess of an offense, I don't see how he can't have a floor of a wide receiver 2 this season. And then right behind him, there's not going to be many options. That's one of the reasons why a wide receiver 2 floor seems like a legitimate bet, because who else are we going to be passing the ball to that often? Allen Lazard might be a wide receiver 3, but he'll probably be a guy that's left on waivers a majority of the time. Josh Reynolds might be a flex at some point in time, but again, another guy we're probably just not going to own very much. Moving on to the NFC East at this point, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. As long as Dak Prescott is healthy for at least 16 games, he's a QB1. And if CeeDee Lamb is his main target, which he should be, he should have a really good ceiling and a really solid floor. George Pickens and his big playability will put him in that wide receiver 2 status at times this season. Maybe he even throws in a wide receiver 1 game here or there, even though I wouldn't expect it. But more than likely, we would be willing to flex George Pickens every single week in 2025. Jalen Tolbert, bench and waivers. Kevontae Turbin, though, could end up being a guy that, for the flex spot, especially if you have any type of return yards from punts or kicks, Turpin absolutely could give you some fantasy points here or there. So if you're in any type of a league like that, maybe keep Turpin on the radar. For the New York Giants, it should be Malik Nabers and it should be Wan'Dale Robinson. Malik Nabers has wide receiver 1 upside. We know that. We've seen it. And with better QB play this year, as long as he's healthy, he should reach that with no problem while having a wide receiver 2 floor. Wan'Dale Robinson has a wide receiver 2 ceiling in PPR leagues. In half PPR leagues, that could be closer to a wide receiver 3 ceiling, because last year, tons of targets, but he doesn't really do a whole lot after the catch. For full PPR and half PPR leagues, though, especially deeper leagues, you could flex him and not really have any issues with it on a weekly basis. And then for Darius Slayton, he's going to have some big games. And for some reason, Malik Nabers misses a game here or there, we might be able to flex Darius Slayton just for his big playability alone. For the Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both carry wide receiver 1 upside. We've seen it on a weekly basis over the last couple of years. But where these two are set apart and why A.J. Brown is drafted higher than Devontae Smith is because Brown's floor is more like a wide receiver 2, where Smith is more like a wide receiver 3. Smith will definitely disappear more often than what Brown will. Jahan Dotson, John Mechie, who was just added from the Houston Texans. For Dotson and Mechie, both of these guys probably bench or waiver plays at best. For the Washington Commanders, we do have a wide range of outcomes for both Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. I think both of these have the potential upside of a wide receiver 1. I think both of these guys have the floor of a wide receiver 3. You could probably argue that Deebo might be a little bit higher for a floor than what Terry McLaurin will be, just because of how he's used in the passing game. You're going to see him in some of those short yardage situations, maybe even a few more targets than Terry McLaurin. But Terry McLaurin was a top 12 wide receiver last year without a ton ton of volume, and there should be an opportunity for him to see a little bit more volume this season anyway. So even if there's a slight regression in terms of touchdowns, hopefully there's a little bit of an improvement in terms of volume to help offset things. If Terry McLaurin or Deebo Samuel were to miss any time, then Noah Brown probably has some flex consideration at that point. For Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane, those two guys, they might see some time in and out of the slot. You might see them on and off the field at times, but more than likely, it would take at least a couple of injuries for these guys to be fantasy relevant. For the AFC North, starting with the Baltimore Ravens, there's only really 3 wide receivers that are moving the needle there for me. Zay Flowers started 2024 with the volume of a wide receiver 1, but it disappeared over the course of the year, and I don't think that that's coming back. So I think his ceiling is more of a wide receiver 2 with a weekly flex floor more than anything else. DeAndre Hopkins, I think he could have some wide receiver 3 upside, but I think his best part of his career is probably behind him at this point, and more than likely he'll see the waivers for a majority of people that decided to give him a shot in drafts. For Rashad Bateman, wide receiver 2 upside because of his big play and big TD capabilities, but if you drafted Rashad Bateman, you may end up leaving him on the bench more times than not and just using him to fill in when needed. For the Cincinnati Bengals, clearly it's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Both of these guys have wide receiver 1 upside. The floor is a little bit different for me. I think because T. Higgins might be a little bit more touchdown dependent, his floor is more of a wide receiver 3, where Jamar Chase is winning everywhere on the field, so his floor is more of a wide receiver 2. Andre Yosevich, if for some reason T. Higgins were to miss a week, I think Yoshi could end up becoming a flex option with some TD upside. Jermaine Burton is a guy that just didn't show enough last season, and the Cincinnati Bengals made that known. So maybe at some point this year, if he takes that step forward, he could be somebody that we stash on the bench, but more than likely, he'll just be a waiver guy. For the Cleveland Browns, the best case fantasy scenario was Joe Flacco starting. That's what we're getting, and I like Jerry Jeudy just a little bit more now than I have over the course of the offseason. With Joe Flacco at quarterback, he's got wide receiver 2 upside. I believe Cedric Tillman also has wide receiver 2 upside. Both of these guys could end up making some big plays. Cedric Tillman is going to be more of your traditional big play threat, while Jerry Jeudy will probably play a little bit more all over the field. However, both of these guys I think still have a floor of a bench play. Now, the reason for that is because I do think both of these guys could have decent fantasy seasons. I don't want us to forget about Isaiah Bond and maybe what they do with the rookie this season, kind of moving him in and moving him around and getting him acclimated to the NFL after really being passed over because of his legal issues. But on the tight end side of things, David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr. could cause this team to run more 2 tight end sets than what we're used to in the past. And if that happens, you have to wonder what that does to Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. So Jerry Jeudy to me definitely has wide receiver 2 upside, and I think is going to make some fantasy owners happy this year. But it's going to be interesting to see what Cleveland does over the course of the first few weeks of the year. But if something were to happen to Joe Flacco, that's also why I'm worried about the floor here, because I don't think Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders will do what is needed to keep all of these guys fantasy relevant. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, I could see DK Metcalf being anywhere from a ceiling wide receiver 1 to a floor wide receiver 3 play. He should see a ton of targets from Aaron Rodgers this year. The guys right behind him, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, they're not proven NFL commodities. Calvin Austin, he's had some decent games here or there. I get it. Roman Wilson, definitely a good college player and could be an unsung hero for this team, giving them some depth at the wide receiver position. I would be most concerned about Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith and the 12 personnel that more than likely they're going to run. But Aaron Rodgers, being the veteran that he is, isn't going to forget about the best pass-catching weapon on his team, DK Metcalf. In the NFC North, kicking it off with the Chicago Bears, DJ Moore, when he gets the ball in space and he's utilized correctly, he's a wide receiver 1. When he's not utilized correctly, he's more of like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. He's got a ton of ceiling. I just hope that Ben Johnson has all of the plays schemed up ready to get him open. And I hope that Caleb Williams can find find him. Rome Odunze, big playability, is going to put him in the wide receiver 2 area because I don't think there's going to be enough consistent volume to make him a wide receiver 1 play. But I do think if you drafted Rome Odunze, at worst, you can flex him this season. Olamide Zaccheaus, I mean, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a thorn in our sides if you have DJ Moore or Rome Odunze to start the season. Because Luther Burden, I think it's going to take him a little bit of time. I think he could end up having a ceiling of a wide receiver 3, but I also believe that he could end up being a guy that we end up putting on waivers at some point in time. For the Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. He's got one of the best floors for the wide receiver position, and he still has a nice amount of upside because Jared Goff does not forget about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams, we saw it last year. He has wide receiver 1 upside, but he is a guy that disappeared a lot last season, and he has more of a flex floor, especially given the offense that he plays in. Isaac Tesla is going to be a guy that you'll hear more and more throughout the season. Best case scenario, he's a wide receiver 3 that we might use when we have some bye weeks we're trying to figure out. Tesla at some point in time, though, could end up going to the waivers because he could be way too touchdown dependent with not enough volume coming his way. Yeah, the Green Bay Packers have a ton of options, but Matthew Golden is at the top of them with a ceiling of a wide receiver 2 play and a floor of a bench player. Jaden Reed is going to be really kind of in that same area for me. I do think he still has some big playability, even though I don't think that he will see as many targets as Matthew Golden. And for Jaden Reed, if you drafted him, you're probably going to hold on to him for a majority of the year, hoping that this is a guy that gets it going at some point in time. Romeo Doubs, probably a wide receiver 3 at best, probably on waivers, worst case scenario. Dontavian Wicks, Savion Williams, both of these guys probably end up ending on waivers more times than not. For the Minnesota Vikings, it will be interesting to see how they scheme the first 3 weeks with no Jordan Addison. The one thing that we do know, Justin Jefferson will be just fine. He's got a ceiling of a wide receiver 1, a floor of a wide receiver 2, and we know JJ McCarthy, he's had worse quarterbacks than him and produced just fine. JJ should get the job done for JJ owners. Jordan Addison, when he comes back, he'll have some wide receiver 2 upside because of touchdown potential, probably a flex floor play more times than not. Adam Thielen could be a flex to begin the season with no Jordan Addison, probably heads to waivers at some point in time. And then Ty Felton and Jalen Naylor. There's been some injuries with the wide receiver core. That's why they decided to bring in Adam Thielen. Now that he's in town, though, Ty Felton and Jalen Naylor probably don't see an awful lot of time. Heading on down to the AFC South, the Houston Texans will be led by Nico Collins once again, but they have brought in some reinforcements to try and keep the pressure off. Upside for him, wide receiver 1. We saw it before his injury last year. We saw it the year prior. Floor on a weekly basis, now that he has more help around him, could end up being wide receiver 3. Christian Kirk figures to be a bigger part of the offense than what we've seen from wide receiver 2s in Houston as of recent. His ceiling could be wide receiver 3. He could be a guy that could also end up being put on waivers at some point. Same could be said for Jaden Higgins, the second round pick that people are very high on. I don't see his ceiling getting much higher than a wide receiver 3 this season, but if Christian Kirk ends up being the guy, we may end up dropping Jaden Higgins at some point in time. Jalen Noel, if there's any injuries anywhere around, maybe he becomes a flex option, but probably on waivers for a majority of the year. There's really no telling who the wide receiver 1 will be in Indianapolis with Daniel Jones as the starting quarterback now. But it's fair to say that Josh Downs and Michael Pittman really share the same ceiling and the same floor, because both of these guys could end up being the wide receiver 1 and have a decent floor every single week of being on your bench. Their ceiling may not get much better. It'd be right around wide receiver 2. I doubt either of them make it into wide receiver 1 territory on a consistent basis. Alec Pierce, if he's healthy for the entire year, maybe we see Alec Pierce reach a new level. Maybe he's a guy that with the big playability can put together some decent flex weeks, wide receiver 3 weeks. More than likely he'll end up on waivers. And then Adonai Mitchell is a good breakout candidate this season, but once again probably shares about the same ceiling and floor as Alec Pierce. For the Jacksonville Jags, Brian Thomas Jr. has wide receiver 1 upside, and he's solid enough that he could also carry a floor as a wide receiver 2 this season. So even if the addition of Travis Hunter and Diami Brown stretch the targets a little more thin than what we saw for him last season, his big playability should still give him a solid floor every single week. Speaking of Travis Hunter, his ceiling for me is a wide receiver 2, but maybe more of a wide receiver 3 or a flex option, depending on how often he ends up being on defense to start. Dyami Brown is going to be a guy that maybe if Brian Thomas Jr. gets banged up, we take Dyami Brown and we put him on the bench just in case we need him for a bye week or anything like that. Parker Washington and newly added Tim Patrick, both of these guys at best with an injury could see some time on your bench, but more than likely we'll see time on waivers. Cam Ward looks every single bit the part of a number 1 overall pick, and that should translate to the wide receivers for the Tennessee Titans as well. Calvin Ridley is expected to be the wide receiver 1. I see wide receiver 2 upside. I think he could have a wide receiver 1 week here or there, but I don't think he's much higher than a wide receiver 2 consistently. As far as his floor goes, he should be a flex option because more than likely he sees the most targets on the team. Tyler Lockett could be a guy that you could flex every once in a while. It really just depends on the connection between him and Cam Ward and the big playability that Tyler Lockett has left. Van Jefferson, Shamiri Dyke, both of those guys, probably bench, best case scenario, more than likely on the waivers all year long. Alec Eomanor is a guy that I want everybody to keep an eye on. And when I did my scouting reports for him at the beginning of the year, I'm not talking about the beginning of the season, back at the beginning of 2025 when we started doing rookie scouting reports, he was a guy that I pinpointed right away. Maybe at some point this year, if Tyler Lockett doesn't end up being the guy, then Eomanor can be a flex option instead. Switching over to the NFC South, and our love for the Atlanta Falcons clearly hasn't been hidden this offseason. I think Drake London has the high upside wide receiver 1 ability with a floor of a wide receiver 2. I mean, Darnell Mooney, Ray McCloud, do we really think either of these guys are going to be so good that Drake London isn't going to see the fair majority of every target in every game? Drake London should be a great asset for anybody that drafts him. Darnell Mooney might not have a ton of upside. Ray McCloud might not have a ton of upside. If you're looking for wide receiver depth in a little bit of a bigger league, then you could take a shot on Darnell Mooney. The Carolina Panthers traded Adam Thielen, which is going to leave a road to some really solid production for Tet McMillan. I don't think anybody has ever doubted how good this kid could be just based on his abilities alone. It was just, where is the path to targets for him this season? And does Adam Thielen get in the way of that? And now that there's no Adam Thielen, Tet McMillan to me is a very, very solid wide receiver 2. Is he going to be a consistent wide receiver 1? I don't know about that, but wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, he should be right in that area on a consistent basis just based on the amount of targets he'll be getting. Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, Jimmy Horn Jr., for Legette and Coker, it's kind of the same thing. Whoever takes over as the wide receiver 2, maybe they have a little flex upside every single week, but more than likely one of them will end up being on waivers, just like Jimmy Horn Jr. Well, it looks like we're going to rely on Spencer Rattler to start 2025, and we'll see how that goes. But Chris Olave, for me, definitely has wide receiver 2 potential because I think he's going to be the most targeted player on this team outside of Alvin Kamara. And I think they're going to have to throw the ball. They're not going to be able to run the ball every single play. Spencer Rattler is going to be giving people targets. How good will those targets be? Chris Olave could have flex as being his floor. So maybe he's a guy that ends up being on your bench that you could try to flex on a weekly basis. He may not have the most upside though, and that might lead you to taking advantage of some other players instead. Rashid Shaheed, we've seen him be a big playmaker. We'll see where he's at coming back from the ACL last year. Hopefully he's 100% healthy, and if he is, wide receiver 2 upside, might see some time on your bench instead. Devon Bell, who they just traded for, Brandon Cooks, who they re-signed and brought in this year. Both of these guys could end up being bench players at some point, but more than likely on the waivers. We know that there's going to be a ton of options for the Tampa Bay Bucks this season, but to begin the year, they might be a little bit more thin. Mike Evans has the wide receiver 1 upside, but as the year progresses and more guys get healthy and Emeka Egbuka emerges, he could end up being a floor of wide receiver 3 every single week if we don't see him walk away with a touchdown or a big play. Emeka Egbuka has the upside of a wide receiver 1 in this offense. They're going to pass it. He's definitely that type of a player. If he fills that Chris Godwin role, we know that Chris Godwin was a wide receiver 1, at one point in time. Wrong video, wrong position. But wide receiver 3 could end up being more of a realistic floor from him, again, once people start getting healthy. When will Chris Godwin be back? I have no idea at this point. Jalen McMillan, he's going to be banged up to start the year. We'll miss the first 4 4 games. He could return after that, though, and Tez Johnson is going to be a guy that's probably going to get a little bit of run to begin the year as well. Dropping in on the AFC West now, and to start with the Denver Broncos, I know for a fact people have not loved my take on Courtland Sutton this offseason. I said it in a video the other day, there was only 3 instances last season where a wide receiver other than Courtland Sutton saw 90% snaps in any given game. They were just filtering guys on and off the field. Nobody stepped up. This year, though, that can change. It looks like Marvin Mims could end up stepping up. Troy Franklin has had a way better camp. Pat Bryant was drafted as well. Pat Bryant could end up being a sneaky game changer at some point in time if Marvin Mims doesn't end up stepping up. So they have better competition at the wide receiver position, which is why, to me, Courtland Sutton really has the ceiling of a wide receiver 2, not a wide receiver 1. And then for a flex spot, I think that's his best bet in terms of his floor. I think he's a guy that we're going to start every single week, but I don't think you're going to love the outcome as much as you did last season. Marvin Mims, because of his big playability and potential special teams ability, could be a wide receiver 2 with some upside there. The bench could end up being his floor as well. Troy Franklin, if there's an injury, maybe he ends up being more of a flex, probably on waivers to start. Pat Bryant could be a bench at some point in time, but will be waivers for right now. At least we know a little bit more about the Kansas City Chiefs heading into week 1, now that Rashee Rice will miss the first 6 games of the season due to his suspension. So Rashee Rice, when he comes back, he has wide receiver 1 potential. We saw it last year for a brief period before the injury. He could end up being just as good as a flex option as well. He might be that number 1 target once he returns from his suspension. Xavier Worthy is going to look to take advantage of those first 6 games. While I believe the competition for targets is a little bit better than it was last year, I still think he's got wide receiver 2 upside, not wide receiver 1 upside. Definitely a flex option to begin the year. It will be the rest of the season. You can probably start him as like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 right now, but then when Rashee Rice comes back, we'll reevaluate whether or not he's a flex. Marquise Brown, because of the big playability, maybe he sees some wide receiver 3 performances, probably more of a waiver wire guy. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's really going to be a thorn in our side for any of the other wide receivers. He might have a touchdown here or there, but he's just going to cause chaos because he'll still targets every once in a while. Jalen Royals is a bench waiver play. Tyquan Thornton is a bench waiver play as well. Maybe there isn't as much clarity for the Las Vegas Raiders, though. Jacoby Myers, possible wide receiver 2 upside at this point. The problem is that he's asked for a trade, so we really don't know where he stands with the organization right now. Also, if his targets are right in line with, let's say, Dante Thornton Jr., let's say Brock Bowers, and he's not significantly higher than those guys in snaps, wide receiver 2 is going to be his best bet in like a PPR league. Probably more of like a wide receiver 3.5 PPR league, or someone we can flex in and out that we need to. Dante Thornton, I think he could be a wide receiver 3 right away. I think he could be a flex right away. We'll see how that happens throughout the first few weeks. His big playability could showcase early. Amari Cooper, depending if he does end up stepping in as a wide receiver 2, if Jacoby Myers ends up getting traded, maybe he becomes a flex option. Trey Tucker, Jack Betch, who was like the guy that everyone wanted after rookie drafts. Both of those guys bench or waivers. For the Los Angeles Chargers, Keenan Allen does muddy things for Ladd McConkey just a little bit. Ladd McConkey is still going to have some wide receiver 1 upside, but I think his floor is definitely a much better bet as a wide receiver 2. Keenan Allen, he could end up being a wide receiver 2 as well, but he could end up being placed on waivers at some point. We'll see just how good he looks after the season gets started. Trey Harris could have a big play here or there, which could lead him to some wide receiver 3 weeks. More than likely, if Keenan Allen is healthy and playing, Trey Harris doesn't have much fantasy value at all. Quentin Johnston, kind of the same thing for him. If Keenan Allen were to get hurt, maybe he steps in and has some big plays. If not, he's probably going to be on waivers. Keandre Lambert-Smith, a guy people were talking about quite a bit in the preseason. Maybe he could be a bench play with some injuries, but as of right now, he'll be a waiver play. Let's wrap things up with the NFC West, and can Marvin Harrison Jr. be a wide receiver 1 for the Arizona Cardinals this year? Yes, he can be. I like the fact that he added some muscle. I like the fact that he's a little bit stronger stronger this year. He really needed it against those better cornerbacks. His floor could end up being as a wide receiver 3, though, if he really doesn't improve a lot off of last season. Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones, I mean, each one of these guys, depending on who ends up being the wide receiver 2, could end up being a flex play at some point in time, but more than likely between Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr. in the run game, all of those guys will be on waivers. I don't hate Puka Nacua, I just don't love the fact that Matthew Stafford's back is already bothering him. So for the Los Angeles Rams, Nacua absolutely has wide receiver 1 upside. Worst case scenario, if everyone stays healthy, Nakua's healthy, Stafford's healthy, no problems whatsoever, he's a wide receiver 2 every single week. He's gonna have that type of a floor. So he's not the worst pick in the world if you still go with him like into the first, early second. For those of you, though, that are a little bit more reserved, maybe wait on that because that wide receiver 1 upside, if someone gets hurt, may not be there nearly as much. Devontae Adams, if Stafford is healthy, I don't see any reason why Devontae Adams does not have a path to being a wide receiver 2. I still think he has plenty left in the tank, and he'll show it this year. Tutu Atwell is probably going to have like a big touchdown here or there, which is going to give him some wide receiver 3 potential, but more than likely he'll be on waivers along with Jordan Whittingham. For San Francisco, I think a lot for these wide receivers is going to hinge on how healthy Brandon Ayuk ends up becoming this season. Right off the bat, Ricky Pearsall is a wide receiver 2 flex type of play. He's going to be the guy with the best big play ability, I think, on this team at the beginning of the year with no Brandon Ayuk. Juwan Jennings, I think, is going to have some wide receiver 2 upside based on touchdown potential, but I don't think he's going to see the consistent amount of targets that we saw last year after a lot of injuries took place. Also, he's been banged up. Also, he doesn't love his contract. Brandon Ayuk, when he returns, he probably has wide receiver 2 upside, but maybe not right away. He might be a guy that just has to chill on the bench until he gets back up to game speed. Sky Moore, he's kind of a bench, a waiver option right now. Maybe at some point in time, he gets a little bit more acclimated and we see something from him. I highly doubt it. Jordan Watkins, at the beginning of the year, he should be starting in 3 wide receiver sets. He might be a flex at some point in time, but probably not. Things are going to look a little different in Seattle this year. No DK Metcalf and no Tyler Lockett. Jackson Smith-Njigba takes over as the wide receiver 1, and he's got a ceiling of a wide receiver 1. We saw it last year. He does have the floor of a wide receiver 3, though, until we see a little bit more about how this offense will play out. We know they're going to run the football quite a bit. Cooper Kupp, if he can stay healthy, he should give you some wide receiver 2 numbers. If he's banged up a little bit from time to time, he might be more of a flex as the season goes on. Torrey Horton, he's one of those guys that's going to kind of fill into that deep role that has been vacated by like Tyler Lockett, even DK Metcalf. We'll see if he can at least stretch the field to open things up for everybody else. Jake Bobo, we're just going to love saying his name every once in a while because he'll score a touchdown and then he'll be right back to waivers. Headliner Nation, hopefully you appreciated the video today, going through over 100 wide receivers, every single team, trying to give you some ceiling and floor predictions for what exactly you'll see from them this year. Make sure to hit the like button, hype the video if you still have hypes available this week. Remember, you only get 3 hypes per week, so choose wisely. I'm gonna get on out of here, Headliner Nation. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
I'm a headliner.